In this video, we'll talk a little bit about grinder maintenance with this particular grinder. It's a Krups GX610050 or something like that. But if you're not in the US, you probably will find this under a Sunbeam brand or some other brand, because it's really just OEM from some other manufacturer. So the tools we need for maintaining this grinder is a wrench, flat, or rather a Phillips screwdriver, small brush, and some dental probing tool, which we'll use to get into the inside the grinder when we want to remove some of the retained grinds. So let's get on with it. First thing you want to do is you want to remove the hopper, and you can just very quickly do that by twisting this around and removing it. That's it. As you can see inside, later on you'll see that there's easily a few grams of coffee retained inside the grinder itself. Then we got to remove this ring here by pressing this button and aligning it so that both the arrows see each other. That's going to remove this top assembly, which contains the top half of the burr. In the course of this video, we'll also see the mods that were done to this particular grinder. When you buy this off the shelf, this grinder is not capable for espresso, but you can definitely modify it so it grinds into the espresso range, and that's what I've done here. So let's get on with it, and we'll review the steps that were done. So I'm just going to set this aside for now. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to remove the lower burr. I can do that, but I can also remove the 4 screws here using this Phillips screwdriver. And let me turn off the video and get back on once it's done. Okay, I've removed the 4 screws over on this burr assembly, but technically speaking, you don't really need to do that if you just want to clean out the burr. But if you want to maintain a grinder properly, I really remove this so that I can get access to the cavities where the grinds are at. And so the quick way of doing this is really just have a little probe that jams it in position, and since the burr turns in a clockwise motion, to unlock it you got to move this counterclockwise, and I probably just jammed this in a little bit too tight, so let's see. Okay, I'm not sure if you're seeing that. Rather, sorry, I should turn in a clockwise motion to unlock. Okay, oops, jammed it in. There you go. So now this top nut is removed. It's a washer, and I'm just going to set things aside like this. Make sure the video you can see that. Okay, and then if we remove this now, you'll see a particular mod that was done for this grinder to grind in espresso range. So I'm just going to remove that, and well, let's just remove the top burr or the bottom burr. So let me go in, and I'm going to remove this little shim over here. Basically, you can add a shim under this, which is what I've done, to raise. You see that paper shim over here? Yep, that raises the lower burr a little bit so it comes closer to the upper burr, making the grind much finer. So the shim itself was not part of the original product. I just cut the piece of cardboard and put it in. And by doing so, this espresso is now able to grind into this grinder is now able to grind to espresso range. But that's not really what we want. However, if you notice, there's now a little bit of a gap between this top and the bottom of the top burr. And see that there's some accumulated coffee that comes in, that slowly creeps in, and after a while that raises this even more, and your grind setting doesn't remain as is, and you can notice that you're getting much more finer grind. And if that's the case, then in my case at least, it takes about a week or a couple of weeks sometimes, and then I would know that it's time to maintain and clean the grinder. And of course I'm going to remove some of this and more of the grinds that you see under it. But for now, we're going to collect all of the retained coffee in here, so you'll see later on once we clean. Alright, so this is really what happens inside. When you grind, the grinds go into these different chambers over here that get pushed out to shoot down into your portafilter. But the original Krups, when you buy this, has a little bit of a protective wire that goes inside, and what I just did there was just to knock it out with this wrench, so that wire is, you don't really need it. It's really just attracts more grind, and it's basically just protection for some guy who would be kind of stupid enough to put their finger inside while you're grinding. But maybe sometimes the child would also be susceptible for that. But another thing that I changed here is there's also a micro switch that was here that gets activated if you press this button. I removed that micro switch and shorted out the leads so that you can just easily turn on the grinder and it will just be activated. The downside for it, of course, is that you can now operate the grinder without this whole upper assembly, and if the burrs are in place, then it could be a dangerous situation. Of course, just be careful, don't do that. So if you notice, I don't have the grinder plugged in at the moment, but if I have that plugged in right now, you see, oops, there goes our grinds. I shouldn't have done that. I should have turned off this, and that's a little mess I created there, but then we can pour off some of what fell off the grinder. And basically, I just want to give you an idea of the amount of coffee that's retained in here. Okay, after cleaning the grinder, you'll get probably this much retained grinds in there. So I'd say this is what, about between 7 to 10 grams, maybe, considering that I had to sweep some of the grounds from the counter into the sink. But so what you would have now are the parts that we're going to put back together. So this is that retaining ring that goes over there that covers much of the chambers where the grinds go, and we also have the upper and the lower burrs, the nuts that hold it in place on the washer, and finally this is the top assembly that locks everything in place. So I've screwed back the top assembly, fixed in the lower burr, and as I mentioned earlier, if the lower burr turns in a clockwise motion, then to lock this nut you have to go counter that motion, so counterclockwise, which is opposite of how you would think usually when you lock a screw, you turn clockwise. But since I also shorted the micro switch, this is what happens now. I can basically turn this on into a switch. It's a safety feature that was disengaged, so you better be careful when you're doing this that you don't get your hand in there and cause some injury. So finally, the top burr just drops in place like that by aligning those marks. And to put it back in place, it's very easy. You just find that area where the two arrows can be aligned here, and just press this button, square it back in, twist it all the way down where you see that that's aligned, and then my espresso range here is between 7 or sometimes 8, and so I can turn this on, and even without a hopper this machine operates. So that's it. So there's your grinds after a couple weeks, or in my case maybe this was 1 week. I'm gonna have to fit in some of these last pieces over here, like the mat for this, and this little nozzle that goes under there, but I'm gonna clean that a little bit more. And finally we're gonna mount the hopper, and there you have it. We have a clean grinder.